Chosen one. All right, let's set the tone right now. This moment isn't an accident, and neither are you. If you've ever been underestimated, misunderstood, or mislabeled because people couldn't make sense of your strength, congratulations. You're exactly where you're supposed to be. You didn't break, you broke through. You didn't just survive, you evolved in silence while they were watching for your downfall. And now you're carrying a kind of power that doesn't need permission to be seen. This space, it's not for the average, it's for the activated, the ones who walk into rooms and shift the energy without saying a word, the ones who aren't chasing validation because they are the validation. You've been called too intense, too deep, too different, but here's the truth. You were never meant to blend in. You were built to disrupt. So welcome, not just to a message, but to a movement, a place for the misfits who turned pain into purpose, for the ones who weren't invited to the table, so they built their own and made it a throne. If you've ever felt like the world didn't know what to do with you, that's because it didn't make you. And what it can't make, it can't manage. Strap in. This isn't for the faint. Let's go. Looking for purpose and peace? Hit subscribe and start the journey. Enduring trials that should have shattered most, you continuously defy expectations by emerging resilient, yet not through mere chance or surface-level toughness. The circumstances surrounding your journey would convince any observer that you ought to have faltered long ago, burdened by relentless challenges and betrayals designed to break your spirit. Instead of succumbing, you've grown sturdier, not because you escaped unscathed, but because adversity sculpted a strength others failed to comprehend. The forces arrayed against you did more than test you. They forged a reservoir of insight and tenacity hidden beneath the calm exterior. While many rely solely on logic and intellect to navigate their lives, you accessed a profound wellspring deeper than thought alone. This connection granted you a way to move beyond ordinary limitations and conventional reactions, leaving your detractors baffled and frustrated. Their attempts to predict your responses or force your surrender consistently fall short because your foundation rests on an unshakable inner alignment. Your progress, quiet yet unstoppable, unsettles those who seek to control through pressure and manipulation. Make your impact eternal. Join now and be a light in someone's darkness. Whispers circulate, attributing your endurance to something unnatural or inscrutable, fortune, trickery, or even mysticism. Yet none of these apply. What you embody is the inevitability of someone attuned to a higher order, whose resilience transcends typical cause and effect. Your presence challenges the notion that anyone can be broken if pressed hard enough. That defiance of expectation is what provokes fear, because the greatest threat is not an unpredictable adversary, but one who has fully realized their own power and refuses to be defined by others' limitations. If your heart overflows with divine love, now is the moment to let it shine. Click the super thank you button on YouTube and give $50 or more to help carry God's light to others. Your gift will bless not only your life, but countless others. You are part of His sacred plan. Your kindness may be the answer to someone's prayer. Share your blessings and honor His kingdom. May His grace guide you always. They anticipated collapse, but instead, something unexpected took root. A kind of quiet evolution no one had planned for. Every dismissal, every attempt to undermine, became a kind of strange fertilizer for an internal recalibration. Where erosion was intended, foundation was secretly being reinforced. The storms they stirred up weren't destructive, they were instructive. Each challenge remapped instincts, reshaped responses, and rewired the very architecture of thought. What looked like stillness on the outside was, in truth, the silent forging of resilience under pressure. What unsettles them now is not merely survival, it's the transformation that occurred in plain sight. While they waited for volatility, they encountered calculation. Instead of reacting, the process became about registering patterns, measuring silences, and learning the choreography of intention disguised as chaos. No longer drawn into cycles of explanation or validation. The presence that now stands is precise, composed, and deliberately unmoved. It's not fueled by revenge, but by clarity, a rare kind that doesn't argue, doesn't perform, and doesn't seek entry into spaces that once seemed essential. Growth arrived without warning and without spectacle, unsettling those who depended on the old version, lingering longer. What confuses them now is the absence of permission. No need to re-enter old rooms, no desire to answer old questions. Not vengeance, but distance. Not noise, but presence. What they once mistook for defeat turned out to be incubation. They tried to interrupt a process they never understood. And now, in the aftermath of all they tried to dismantle, they're faced with something they didn't mean to build. A refined force shaped by everything they misjudged. What unsettles them most is not that distance grew, it's that their hands were never truly holding anything real. What they grasped was a reflection, a projection, filtered through layers built for self-preservation. The core remained untouched, invisible to those who confused proximity with access. Misled by illusions, they moved with the arrogance of assumed knowledge, unaware that they were engaging a version too shallow to reveal anything of worth. This confusion lingers because what they designed as traps now lie useless, abandoned. The target they thought they had mapped was never in range. While they calculated moves and baited reactions, the true presence had already disengaged from their board entirely, operating by a rhythm they couldn't hear. Their schemes floundered not from lack of effort, but from misidentification. They staged performances for an audience that had long since left the room. Control requires vulnerability, and they mistook politeness for dependence. They mistook patience for compliance. All the while, beneath the stillness, there was discernment, a quiet, disciplined kind. Every laugh was timed, every agreement measured, every nod a signal of strategy, not surrender. What appeared as concession was actually documentation. They were offering rehearsals, while a completely different story was already being written in solitude. When presence finally dissolved from their reach, it wasn't abrupt, it was precise. A silent severing, not a storm, but a vanishing act with no return cue. And what they label as mystery is merely clarity withheld. Now, with no buttons to press and no predictable pattern to exploit, they circle shadows. They cannot provoke, predict, or possess what has become opaque by design. They are chasing echoes of a form that never gave them substance. The discomfort they feel now is rooted not in loss, but in revelation. They never touched what truly mattered. The voice, the pulse, the calling, all of it remained veiled behind layers only authenticity can unveil. And now, in absence, they confront what they never understood in presence. Not everything that smiles is open, and not everything visible is available. Some beings are built to be unreadable for a reason. The acceleration they witness isn't born of speed, but of depth, a depth that's beyond their metrics. While they measure progress by milestones and mirror what's popular, there's another kind of movement unfolding, one that's not rehearsed, not replicated, and certainly not explained. This isn't ambition fueled by urgency, but navigation attuned to unseen rhythms. There's no script, only instinct that listens before it leads. What they call luck is just timing aligned with insight. While they consult manuals and mimic methods, there's a blueprint being followed that wasn't handed down, it was revealed. The leaps they label unfair are the results of waiting longer, hearing clearer, choosing quieter. They see arrivals and assume shortcuts, unaware of the detours taken in silence, the internal work done without applause. Make your impact eternal. Join now and be a light in someone's darkness. While they chase validation, what's unfolding here is sustained by intention, not permission. It doesn't race, it aligns, it doesn't panic, it listens. That's why things open seemingly without effort, not because the rules were broken, but because the route was different. Built on intuition, sharpened by trust, this kind of progress doesn't wobble with doubt or stall at disapproval. It's unnerving to them, the way certainty moves without spectacle, how momentum grows without clamor. They operate in systems that require constant maintenance. This moves through a channel of flow. Not because it's easier, but because it's synchronized. It respects delay, embraces pauses, and chooses precision over haste. That's the difference. Not just movement, but movement anchored in purpose. The discomfort they feel is not envy, it's confusion. They recognize the outcome, but not the source. They see the growth, but can't replicate the seed. Because what's being built here isn't taught, it's received. And where they seek strategies, here, there's surrender. That's the real distinction. Not acceleration for its own sake, but progress that listens before it speaks and lands exactly where it was always meant to. If your heart overflows with divine love, now is the moment to let it shine. Click the super thank you button on YouTube and give $50 or more to help carry God's light to others. Your gift will bless not only your life, but countless others. You are part of His sacred plan. Your kindness may be the answer to someone's prayer. Share your blessings and honor His kingdom. May His grace guide you always. Some shifts are personal, but others echo through time. And this one shook more than one life. This wasn't about improving one chapter, it was about ending an entire book written in silence, sorrow, and inherited weight. What many endured without questioning, this time was met with resistance. The cycle was not passed down, it was interrupted. Not because it was easy, but because someone finally decided that endurance without healing was no longer an option. What unfolded wasn't self-care, it was a dismantling. Not visible from the outside, but seismic within. The ground didn't just crack, it was rebuilt. Systems that had survived off silence began to tremble. And that's why presence alone now feels like a confrontation. It's not loud, it's not demanding, but it brings a frequency that shakes what's been buried for far too long. Not everyone understands it, but they feel it. It disturbs the order, not because it tries to, but because it can't help but expose what was always wrong. The old scripts were torn apart without fanfare. Repetition was replaced with questioning. The roles once played out in secret, the guilt, the blame, the silence, were no longer acceptable. Agreements that had gone unspoken for generations were finally broken, not out of rebellion, but necessity. And those who benefited from the dysfunction now feel displaced. The unspoken expectations no longer hold weight. What was once considered tradition began to feel like confinement. The questions rose, uncomfortable, necessary. Why do we allow harm to go unspoken? Why do we mistake survival for wellness? Why do we defend what never protected us? These questions weren't just asked, they were demanded, and with each answer, old scaffolding fell. Permission wasn't needed. Truth gave its own authority. Some connections began to flicker, not because of arrogance, but because the old dynamics couldn't hold under new light. Familiar places felt unfamiliar. Interactions became strained. But this wasn't distance. It was clarity. Those who once recognized the face now sensed the shift in spirit. Not because it was performed, but because transformation radiates without asking for attention. And this transformation didn't just break routine, it altered trajectory. Legacy wasn't received, it was rewritten. Choices once unimaginable became standard. The permission to be whole changed everything for those who would come after. And the discomfort that now fills old rooms is not about who changed, but about what no longer hides. The discomfort isn't rooted in misunderstanding. It's rooted in recognition. Something in the atmosphere shifts when authenticity enters, not because it demands attention, but because it doesn't beg for acceptance. That kind of presence highlights every corner where someone chose the easy path. Without speaking, it speaks. Without performing, it confronts. It's not mystery that unsettles people, it's memory. Memory of the spark they ignored, the road they never followed, the truth they buried beneath applause and pretense. This presence doesn't echo noise, it vibrates with substance. And for those who traded growth for comfort, the reflection becomes unbearable. It's not about being different, it's about being honest. And honesty has a way of unraveling illusions. No one is trying to shame, only to live freely. But in a room full of performance, truth can feel like a storm, because it disrupts narratives crafted to explain giving up. Seeing someone thrive without compromise forces a kind of internal audit. It makes people wonder who they could have been had they risked more than appearance. What's labeled as arrogance is often just alignment. What's framed as rebellion is often just integrity. And that gap between what is and what could have been makes people defensive. They don't want to confront that they once had similar fire. They just chose to smother it. And so, they pull back. Not because of hate, but because of discomfort. Not because of superiority, but because of self-protection. It's not the person that unsettles them. It's the version of themselves they buried long ago. They watch someone stand firm in a way they never dared to, and it stings. Not because it's wrong, but because it was once within reach. This isn't mystery, it's exposure. And not everyone is ready to see what's reflected back when excuses are no longer louder than truth. There's a calm some carry that doesn't ask to be understood. It demands to be respected. It isn't soft or silent for show. It's the result of seasons where breaking wasn't an option and survival became a sacred ritual. That quiet now isn't passivity. It's evidence. Evidence of the storms endured, the illusions shattered, the strength built in invisible spaces. So when provocations arrive and there's no reaction, it's not because nothing is felt. It's because everything has already been faced. That stillness comes from walking through nights that stole everything but breath, from unlearning the need to respond to every disruption. While others raise their voices to feel heard, this stillness speaks without volume. It doesn't argue because it no longer requires permission to exist in peace. People mistake this calm for distance, for coldness, for detachment, but none of those labels apply. It's discipline, it's clarity, it's the product of learning that not everything deserves energy. The chaos, once tolerated, now burns out before it can even touch the surface. There's no space for petty storms when you've already rebuilt yourself from ruins. This quiet rattles those who thrive on friction. They sense there's no doorway left for them to enter. They don't know how to function without triggering, without noise. They seek reaction like a lifeline, and when none comes, they spiral because they are no longer being fed. That peace doesn't just protect, it repels. It dismantles every tactic aimed to disrupt it. What they encounter now is restraint, forged through fire. Not inaction, but full control. Not withdrawal, but elevation. And what unnerves them is knowing that no matter how loud they get, nothing inside this fortress moves. That's not weakness, that's command. A kind of control that no longer battles. It just walks away and stays intact. They scripted a future for someone who no longer exists, and that realization has left them scrambling. The version they constructed was never meant to evolve. It was designed to remain stuck, predictable, and manageable. But the moment that illusion dissolved, so did their sense of control. The person they miscast rewrote the entire sequence without asking for their blessing. It wasn't noise or rebellion that undid their structure. It was quiet reconstruction. Bit by bit, boundaries were drawn, and narratives lost their grip. The mask they were comfortable with vanished, replaced by a presence they couldn't define. And that's what truly unsettled them. Not the transformation, but the fact that it happened without their participation. They built their sense of self on your stagnation. They relied on your silence to validate their comfort. When you stepped out of the frame, the whole picture warped. It wasn't vengeance, it was freedom. But to those who cling to dysfunction, freedom looks like betrayal. They call it selfish when you finally stop bleeding for their peace. And what threatens them most is that this new reality isn't loud, isn't boastful. It simply is. It exists beyond their reach, no longer feeding the roles they need you to play. They're disturbed not by what you said, but by what you stopped tolerating. You didn't burn bridges, you stopped crossing them. You walked out of a room you were never meant to stay in, and they can't stop watching the door you closed, because now they know their influence was never the source of your worth. They never held the pen. You've been writing your life in invisible ink long before they noticed the shift. And now, the pages are unfolding in ways their imagination never accounted for. This isn't rebellion, it's reclamation. And for those who remain trapped in roles handed down by fear, expectation, or guilt, your liberation is not just confusing, it's terrifying. Make your impact eternal. Join now and be a light in someone's darkness. Some existences are too layered to be summarized, too shifting to be grasped. Yet there's always an attempt, a push to shrink depth into something recognizable, something easy to define. Labels become weapons, titles become cages, and the world breathes easier when it can slap a tag on someone and call it understanding. But that tactic fails when the subject refuses to stay still. No matter how many frameworks are constructed, they crumble under the weight of someone who keeps changing frequencies. Not erratically, intentionally. Evolution for such a being is not a phase, it's the default. And that refusal to remain digestible rattles the ones who have accepted fixed roles. They want linearity, but what they're witnessing is someone shaped like a prism, bending light, not absorbing limitation. They whisper that you're inconsistent, unpredictable, maybe even contradictory. But what feels unstable to the rigid is simply freedom in motion. You're not built to pick a single mask and wear it forever. There's no binary for you to fold into. There's complexity, contradiction, and completeness, all woven together. not for applause, but because that's the nature of someone refusing to live inside anyone else's mold. The ones who demand you pick a lane are often those who forgot how to explore. They flinch at your transitions, not because you are wrong, but because you are proof that growth can be constant. Every time you shift, they're reminded of the versions of themselves they buried. Your presence doesn't ask for permission. It moves as needed, shedding definitions the moment they dull. And that unsettles many, because you aren't seeking market approval or belonging. You're embodying a design that doesn't ask to be sold. Each chapter of your life breaks their framework further. Each pivot disrupts their illusions of safety. But you aren't here for neatness. You are the reminder that some souls were never meant to settle, only to expand. If your heart overflows with divine love, now is the moment to let it shine. Click the super thank you button on YouTube and give $50 or more to help carry God's light to others. Your gift will bless not only your life, but countless others. You are part of His sacred plan. Your kindness may be the answer to someone's prayer. Share your blessings and honor His kingdom. May His grace guide you always. Some lives do not follow the usual pulse of the world. They dance to a rhythm that predates measurement. And when they move, they disrupt every metric built to quantify progress. Those who rely on sequence and standard fall into confusion, trying to track the steps. But there's nothing to follow. This isn't strategy, it's remembrance. Nothing visible explains how you leap past boundaries, recover without traces, and unlock what others spend decades trying to reach. They mistake it for luck, assume there's a loophole. But the truth sits deeper. It's alignment, rooted not in formula, but in memory. Memory of a reality coded long before the physical rules were penned. You don't bend expectations, you're simply not shaped by them. The world calculates trajectory by patterns and plans, but your direction responds to signals they cannot read. The rules they cling to don't govern your path because your foundation isn't made of permission. Every move that stuns them was whispered to you in silence long before it showed up in form. They scramble for explanations, search for logic, hoping to decode your motion with their maps. But maps don't work in realms where coordinates are internal. There's no trick, only trust. A kind of knowing that doesn't ask for external confirmation. You've moved in the dark with no flashlight, only fire inside. And somehow, it always lands where it's meant to. That's what startles them. Not just what you do, but how you do it without their scaffolding. Your rise interrupts their storyline. You don't just escape the box. You remind them the box was imaginary all along. They've built their reality on structure. You've built yours on presence. One collapses without rules. The other thrives beyond them.